Okay, so let's go with forward first, because most of the saddles, unfortunately, sliding forward on hurt the horse tremendously on very sensitive areas, such as the shoulder bone, the shoulder blade, or the cartilage, or the lung meridian point, or all the nerve areas in the horse's shoulder area. So no rider wants to ride along and feels like, oh, that saddle is going to go so far forward, I fly off with my saddle over the horse's neck. So this little sliding forward, people say, oh, it's okay. It doesn't bother me, but it bothers the horse. So the question is, what makes a saddle go forward, right? So think about this. Visualize a pear, the fruit, the pear. And if you look at the pear, when it's laying sideways, you see it big in the back and then it goes narrow towards the front. Now you visualize a girth or a wool piece of thread, a wool thread. And you want to make that thread halfway between the narrowest part of the pear and the biggest part of the pear. You want to make a nice narrow knot, like tight knot, nice narrow. You will see every time you pull, that wool thread will slide forward to the narrowest part of the pear. So a girth will always slide towards the narrowest part of the horse's body. Here's an example. Why does it slide backwards? Sometimes, especially endurance racing horses, race horses, or endurance horses, race horses, or very skinny horses, they have no stomach, very, very skinny line, and the girth wants to go to the narrowest area, so it slides back. Most riding horses, however, are more like the pear. I got a see-through horse here. Let me just bring that down. So if you look through it, you can see how this is wide, and then it goes narrow towards the front. So the girth can go only so far. In my first answer with the hair, I talked about 3 points. Okay, they need to sit behind that shoulder blade. Now, if the 3 points are too wide, kind of like a helmet, right? If the helmet is too wide, the helmet slides down, right? Falls down. Saddle tree is too wide, goes forward. Oh, you know what? I put a saddle pad on, so it's nice and high over the withers, but the 3 point doesn't have anything to hold it going forward. No saddles have 3 points. They all have 3 points. They're looking for the edge of the shoulder blade. So a good fitting saddle is just wide enough to find that support, but not too narrow that it sits way above it, because then it will slide back, because the shoulder can't go through, and the shoulder in the movement pushes the saddle back. All right, so the forwardness comes often if the tree is too wide, and the slide back if the tree is too narrow. Okay, helmet, too narrow, it sits way on top. I shake my head, it flies backwards off. If it's too wide, slides down, or in the saddle scenario, slides forward. Then we got the angle. So what's the difference between a tree angle and a tree width? These two, here we go. I use my head as a support. Where my hands are, that's the angle. So from the corner, from the pommel down, that's the angle. Okay, so I can go wide in the angle or narrow. And the tree width, I can make that narrow through there or wider. So if we talk about Western saddle, exactly the same. And you get that Western tree here. Okay, so here you see that would be how far the bars are apart. Tree width, right? Bar width. And then you see the different angle of the bars. So if the angle of the bar is too wide, it goes backwards. Why? Because the rib cage angle, that's where we're trying to match, okay, is steeper here than in the back. So there's the reverse where the saddle slides forward or back. Rib cage goes narrow to the front. The angle is too narrow, saddle goes forward. If the angle is wide, it slides back. I give you another example with a helmet. So we talked about tree width already, all right? That's a helmet too wide, slides down. Helmet too narrow, sits too high. Now I talk about the side of the helmet, okay? So if the side of the helmet is too wide, right, fits me in the width, but the helmet, it's wide here. Every time I ride around the corner, the helmet sits like this. I look like a goof because my helmet is always sitting sideways. So obviously I want that to be parallel. If it's too narrow, then it digs into my temple, and that hurts a lot, right? So that doesn't even fit around my head because the angle is so narrow. So that's how I like to explain the angle and the width and how it makes the saddle go forward or back. So now we have another reason why the saddle goes forward, okay, which is the length. The length of the saddle is so crucial, okay? And I'm talking about it cannot go over the bar and it cannot go past the last rib. See how these ribs are sticking out to the side? You can barely see them. They're so thin. And I happen to have a lumbar. Okay, so this is called a lumbar vertebrae. I'm going to show you the first lumbar vertebrae. I have it right here. So look how thin this is. Look how thin this is. Right. So unfortunately, I dropped it a couple of times and it keeps breaking. But here, to compare the pen, that you get an idea, visual how thin this lumbar vertebrae is. So it should never sit there. Then people say, "Oh, but my Western saddle is so big, and the horses don't normally don't hurt so much, and they're quite long." With a slight difference that the Western saddle, anything in front of the swell, this part here where my hand is, we call it the front flare. Like the word says, it needs to flare up. It sits over the shoulder blade, but it doesn't bear any weight, so it flares up. In the back of the Western saddle, okay, we pass the cantle. We call it the rear flare. That's where I put my packing saddle, my tent, my provisions, and so on and so forth, right? So on the English saddles, you don't have your additional stuff you normally carry around with, right? So the actual contact area has to be the right length. Back to the helmet. I want a helmet what fits from front to back. That's my head length, okay? So the width was important, the angle was important, and the length. So these three things are determined in your trees. In many saddles now, we at Schleser offer 3 different systems. 2, you can do it under the supervision with us or by yourself, directly on the horse, or with us. We make saddles where we can adjust not just the angle, the width, also we can, on some saddles, independently decide how long the tree is and the panel. Okay, so we're not done yet. Remember the thread I was telling you with the pair? So where the billets hang. So in other words, this particular saddle right behind me here, you see over there, here's the billet on a Western saddle. This system, you as a rider, soldier, cowboy, can decide if you want that full rigging, 7/8, 3/4, and on jumping saddles over here, you've got billets, and you have 1, 2, 3 billets. Sometimes there are 4 billets. On English dressage saddles, you have sometimes billets that have a clip. You see that clip back there, right? So many of the saddles have adjustable billet system or multiple billets, and they're important because you need to think about how does the girth aligns with the girth groove and where it's attached to the saddle. So if the girth groove is far forward and the billet's attachment far back, it just slingshots your saddle forward. Last not least comes the rider. We call it the pumping rider. When people override their saddle and think with their pelvis thrust to make the saddle go forward, especially in the modern saddles. This is a piece of paper which I found on the internet, and it really makes me laugh. Now, this is over 15 years old. So in 2010, the saddles looked like this one. And then they predicted that in 2022, people will ride in saddles with bigger thigh rolls than their legs are. And we, of course, all laughed about it. What comes in 2026, you know, where you got that brace all the way up to the belly button, and then you got the cantle all the way to the shoulder blade. And then, of course, they joked around until all the way to the neck and to the front and back. So the saddles have changed because whatever the reason is. And the fact is what they predicted in 2010, that people will ride in saddles which are bigger than the rider's leg. Check this out. This was the lady who was riding in the Olympics in London. Look how massive these saddles are. The rider's leg, you can't even see the legs. And then look how high the cantle is. So if you have a pumping rider or a saddle what is more like a prosthesis or like an orthopedic saddle, looks like it, right? Then through the movement, the rider pumps the saddle forward, right? So these are the main reason why a saddle goes forward.